Would you mind? We've got group business to take care of. I think he's holding Alexis. Careful, careful. Damn, hardly any difference. You two. You're late. You're late. The gendarme returns. What do you need? You're back. It certainly looks like my jacket, Alexis. Where did you get that gendarme? Confiscated? Nix is probably going to say it was civil asset forfeiture. Unlikely. That's real Sarmaritzian twill. Only old Sarmaritzian communists and drug smugglers wear those anymore. See, Uli? It's just like Mazov wrote. How does it go, gang? I assumed it was Maurice who broke into my room to play a trick on me. I didn't think I'd actually been raided by the RCM. Absolutely not. You have to keep it. You're right. It's better. Oh, gendarme, because this is perfect. You're right. It was a gift from my grandmother. But now you've got to keep it. Can you imagine the look on Maurice's face when he finds out the RCM has been kicking my door down? And now they've shown up in force to break up our meeting. And now they've sent one of their agents to infiltrate our meeting. The RCM wants to join us? Interesting. Does that mean you've done the reading? That's the whole point, of course. We can't just have anybody waltzing in here. Martinez is crawling with reactionary infiltrators. There are RCM spies, for one. Just recently, someone even broke into my apartment, if you can believe it, to say nothing of Gottwaldians and iconoclasts. Are you saying you haven't done the reading for tonight? We all have to take precautions, especially during these delicate times. What matters is that you've made it, and that you've done the reading. You have? Excellent. Let's hear your critique then. Yes, a revolutionary reading group. The most ideologically advanced materialist reading group in Martinez. But it sounds like that's news to you. Well, this is getting awkward. I'm not sure what you're expecting to find here then. Go ahead. Characters? What characters are you talking about? They always say that when they haven't done the reading. Too many words? In the most generous sense, I would say we're cultivating revolutionary consciousness. But more specifically, we are running a reading group. It's the most rigorous and theoretically advanced materialist reading group in Martinez. We have been known to get into some spirited debates, but it's always in service of our larger intellectual and ideological project. That's our whole thing. The world is so shallow, all noise and repetition. We're interested in genuinely radical critique. It's really nothing like that. A book club is a place for talking about the plot points of bourgeois social novels and sipping effervescent cocktails. It's nothing like that. A Yankfest is a decadent bourgeois phenomenon, a pastime for overeducated office workers who lack proper revolutionary outlets for their social dissatisfactions and repressed sexuality. But now we're getting hung up on the pathologies of capitalism. Let's move on. One of capitalism's more banal pathologies. But let's move on. Within the contours of Mazovian historical materialism, of course. We study all the foundational texts of Mazovian theory, of course. Just last week, we finished the second volume of Puncher and Watman's Innocence of Capital. And before that, we spent 6 weeks on State and Plasm. We've also read Wertmüller's The Megastructure of History. And before that, Real and Reality, the original Fisdale translation. Not that watered down revisionist garbage. But, of course, our special emphasis is on the theories of Ignaz Nilsson and his followers, especially the inframaterialists. He also happens to be the greatest communist theorist after Mazov himself. It was Nilsson who first postulated the existence of ideological plasm, which forms the basis of inframaterialist theory. One thing you learn quickly at university is that you're not going to find a real education in any lecture hall or discussion seminar. Exactly. The only worthwhile part of the so-called École Normale de Recherche is the library. That's where we've made our greatest critical strides. Lynching? No. We're not an operational cell. You're saying you think the mercenary was killed by communism itself? In any case, it's not like the SRV has established a party line on the subject of lynchings in Martinez. Our stance. What? Does he want to know if the SRV has established a party line on the lynchings in Martinez? Good point. So as a provisional matter, I can say we support it. No, we're an independent organization. We acknowledge and respect the union's efforts, but our interests are more theoretical than Mr. Clare's. That's easy. Crime is simply the inevitable expression of the injustice and incoherence embedded within capitalism itself. It's a symptom, in other words, not a cause. No, unfortunately, the communards were hunted down and killed nearly to a man. All that's left of them are bones and old rifles. The Insulindian deluge wiped out an entire generation of communists. Afterward, they were all bulldozed into mass graves. Not exactly the second incarnation of Krasmazov, is he? He's a world historical nightmare. One from which we've yet to awaken. Yes, like that one. I wonder how many of these are still lying around in cellars or sealed up behind the masonry. Can I hold it? It's heavier than I was expecting. Of course. What would I even do with it? What's it for? Ah, I see. That's certainly kind of you. Right. Sure he does. Right. Of course it is. What do you mean? This is the reading group. We're in something of a rebuilding phase. Intellectual attrition is maybe the best way to describe it. Felix said he couldn't keep up with the reading on top of his classwork. And Susanna wanted to read text other than Mazovian theory. Like novels, if you can believe it. We've tried recruiting new members, but unfortunately the current intellectual climate is pretty hostile to inframaterialist thought. These days, if you're on the left, the ascendant schools are the Gottwaldians and their iconoclasts. Right. Then there was the whole turnip debacle. They're the most depressing school of communism. They love writing long books with a patina of Mazovian theory to cover up their cheap psychologizing. It's okay for Uli to say that because his dad is from Gottwald. The Gottwald school believe that intellectuals as a class are incapable of sparking revolutionary change. So all they can do is critique capitalism from inside itself. It is miserable. That's probably why they're always committing suicide. If it were, they wouldn't keep committing suicide. Do you think all the problems in the world can be reduced to repressed sexual urges? I can tell you're a man who has his urges, but I can also tell you're no Gottwaldian. Well, there you have it. You're not a Gottwaldian then. You see, the Gottwald school look like communists. They talk like communists. But scratch the patina and you'll see beneath that they're just depressed liberals who've read too many books. That's why they spend all their time smoking cigarettes and writing long works of criticism that make you want to commit suicide. For starters, they love talking about beans. That's right. Iconoclasts are obsessed with beans. They love thinking about beans. They love counting beans. But most of all, they love building models to predict how many beans there'll be in the future. Oh, sure. But iconoclasts are obsessed with beans. They love thinking about beans. They love counting beans. But most of all, they love building models to predict how many beans there'll be in the future. You're no iconoclast then. They're obsessed with beans. They love thinking about beans. They love counting beans. But most of all, they love building models to predict how many beans there'll be in the future. They're by far the most bean-centric school of communism. See? You're already falling for that scarcity logic. You start off assuming there aren't enough beans to go around. So naturally you want to cut the bean rations in half. Oh, please. There's nothing moderate about their love for counting beans. If I were a Gottwaldian, I would probably diagnose them with Bohnenfixierung. You see, iconoclasts claim to be communists, but in reality they're just liberals with hard-ons for spreadsheets. Of course not. The only people who actually call themselves liberals are mouth-foaming reactionaries. It's an unfortunate story. You see, our ex-comrade Maurice is something of an economist. Right. So a few weeks ago we were discussing the extra physical capabilities of the revolutionary state, and Maurice said, what were his exact words, Ulex's? Basically, he was rejecting the whole foundation of inframaterialist theory. We were extremely disappointed. Maurice used to be a good friend of ours. I'll grant you it can be overwhelming at first. But once you understand the basics, it's all quite intuitive. Simply that under suitably revolutionary conditions, crop yields naturally increase relative to non-revolutionary crops, which Maurice somehow has the gall to deny. For us, the question boiled down to, if you don't even accept the basic ideas of Nielsen and inframaterialist theory, why are you in the reading group? Nielsen. Ignace Nielsen. Of course you do. It's pretty basic stuff. Exactly. What educated person could believe that turnips grow at the same rate under capitalism and communism? Well, it wasn't so much that he was expelled. Nothing, just messing around until the meeting started. You've read our article? I don't think so. Unless you've been hanging around the cultural studies faculty at the École Normale de Révachol. Well, don't keep us on tenterhooks. What did you think of the essay? Well, I hope you'll let us know when your monograph is coming out. Well, yes, that's the crux of our thesis. Ulysses is especially interested in capitalist violence. Well, of course, that's just an initial foray into the subject. We're hoping to return to it for a more substantial treatment next term. In any case, I'm glad our piece found its audience. That's always the hope with these things, you know. They're good notes, a little brutal on questions of style, but he's not wrong about any of it. Would it be alright if I kept this for a while? I'd just like some time to think about your comments. Thanks, I appreciate it. Sure, right. I got the main idea anyway. We typically only accept new members once per semester. There's this whole process with essays and presentations on assigned topics. But given that we have some extra seating at the moment, I guess we could be convinced to expedite an application or two. I am serious. As materialists, we've got to adapt to conditions as they are. Besides, he'll still need to pass the interview portion of the entrance process, assuming he's even still interested, that is. Oh, you want to start now? Sure, we can manage that. Go ahead and take a seat. Since we haven't had time to prepare an exhaustive questionnaire, I think we can keep this interview more freeform. Why don't you tell us a bit about the books you're interested in? And we'll just see where the conversation goes. Don't you think, though, that you can only really understand current events if you have a firm background in history and political theory? Absolutely. It's the only proper foundation to develop a real understanding of events. Don't think I'm familiar with it. Give us a quick summary, if you don't mind. But then, any critical account of Dolores Day's reign has to seriously reckon with her atrocities in Margartania and La Vuelta during the Mexican secession. Don't you think? Total nonsense. The greatest thing Dolores Day ever did was get blasted by her own terrier. The whole Innocentic system practically requires that. Without true gods, we are made to set them up for ourselves. Ha! It's good you were able to see through even that cozy nostalgic pulp. I'll say the beginnings are very delicate things. That makes it all the more important that you start with the right books. It's so good. Brutally revelatory. Oh, right. We've been meaning to try that out. But then my issue with these historical cue pushes is that they offer the illusion of subjectivity even as they reinscribe the logic of colonialism itself. Though I'd love to hear your take on it. Listen, this is a forward-thinking group. It's entirely your business, of course. Anyway, we also enjoy a good board game every once in a while. The other week, Ulysses and I tried this new one where everyone is competing to manage their own zone of ecological catastrophe. You should see the components. Of course, the one thing capitalism does better than every other ideology is novel and clever distractions. It's all one never-ending dopamine dripper. Interesting. Say more about that. But don't you think that pornographic fascist mythology gets pretty tiresome after a few books? No offense, of course. Well, there's certainly value in that kind of reading. Comrade Mazov says something on that note in his collected speeches. Of course you do. I just hope when you're reading it, you've got a sturdy pair of gloves on. Oh, sure. We don't mean to deny the value of pleasure in reading. In any case, I think we've heard enough. We could use someone with your perspective in the group, with just a bit more theoretical foundation. I think you'll be making real contributions. That's enough, Uli. It's the gendarme's opinions we are interested in. But to Comrade Ulix's point, isn't there value in reading really difficult books, just for the sheer challenge of it? Oh, right. 16 days of coldest, whatever. What was your take on it? It's no wonder you couldn't finish it. Sounds like turgid bourgeois social realism. Sounds to me like a typical bourgeois social novel designed to assuage the egos of frustrated housewives and win international awards. And Gradian realism is the worst realism. It's nearly as bad as Gottwaldian critical theory. I'm sure as a gendarme, you have a very interesting take on the Mullen character. A compelling point for sure. We'd probably be better off if more police officers learned to think so reflectively about their social function. Makes sense. It's natural to seek out reflections of your own experience in literature when the politico-economic system doesn't permit genuine self-realization. That's an unfortunate quality of pulp fiction. Much of it is written to be disposable both on an intellectual and material level. But at least crime literature, as a genre, is able to engage with the systemic failures of capitalism. Wait, you play Weird Al? I'm just saying it's heavily implied that Welkin are the bourgeois of the Weird Al setting. That's a fair point. Personally, I never understood the point of picking a human in the Weird Al setting. But to each their own. There's no doubt about it. I just wish they had more flexibility with their subraces. I do hope they revise it in the next edition. But for now, I'm quite proud of the high Welkin I built for our most recent campaign, combining the best race with the worst race. Not sure about the skill progressions, but I bet the role-playing opportunities are wild. He's pretty awesome, I won't deny it. But seriously, the next campaign, you've got to be there. I need to see this hybrid in action. In any case, I think we've heard enough. We could use someone with your perspective in the group. With just a bit more theoretical foundation, I think you'll be making real contributions. Aha, a real old-school pedestrian materialist. All right, we'll play along. But now I'm curious. Do you think there's value in reading so-called practical nonfiction? So what sort of practical works are we talking about? So you're saying you've got to have a certain practical foundation before you move on to more abstract topics. Okay, I'm following. A fair point. It also reminds me of one of Mazov and Nielsen's unrealized projects, a universal system of communist pictographs, one that would allow revolutionaries to communicate and organize across any language barrier. That's true. I recall from one of psycholinguistics lectures that the letter A is derived from the Proto-Pericanassian glyph meant to represent a reed hut. Good God, have we really been talking about the alphabet for a quarter hour? Interesting. I always thought that stuff was common folks' superstitions, repackaged as bourgeois spiritualism. But maybe I've been overly dismissive. To be perfectly honest, poultice is one of those words I see around, but I have no idea what it means. Oh, sounds nice actually. Comrade Mazov himself preferred chamomile tea, as I'm sure you're aware. Grain spirits are dangerous. That's why Comrade Mazov himself preferred chamomile tea, as I'm sure you're aware. Ogotwalian will tell you that it's an inescapable fact of modernity, that we can only repackage our collective history in increasingly ludicrous forms. There are so many theories out there, most of them ridiculous. But we'd be here all night if we tried to get into them. Cockatoos, fascinating. So tell us what you gathered from your ornithological researches. I have to say, I never realized cockatoos could be such needy emotional disasters, just like people. I have to say, I never realized cockatoos could be so apocalyptic. I've only ever seen the grey ones. I have to say, I underestimated the opulence of cockatoos. I've only ever seen the grey ones. I have to say, I never realized humans and cockatoos have so much in common. It makes sense though. Mazovianism stresses the essential continuity between humanity and nature. So anything you find in one should be reflected in the other. What's the exact quote, Uli? In any case, I think we've heard enough. We could use someone with your perspective in the group. With just a bit more theoretical foundation, I think you'll be making real contributions. Okay, we'll bite. What sort of stories are we talking about? Sounds like old-fashioned revolutionary espionage. Let's see where this goes. A story with an erotico-political angle. Let's see where this goes. Oh, we're getting into the psychiatric pathologies of life under capital. Let's see where this goes. You've got our attention. Let's see where this goes. Okay, but when you say he spoke to you, you mean metaphorically, right? I'm just trying to imagine what it would have been like had he died in the summer. But I still don't see what the lady driver had to do with a strike standoff. So is it typical for men of your background to use that, formulation? I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like to wake up with no concept of what money is. So have you figured out his real identity? Ah, so there is a supranatural angle to this case. Wait, are you saying the hanged man wasn't really hanged? Clearly there's a lot of ins and outs. It almost reminds me of a Dick Mullen novel. Ah, right. You were playing the long game. So you're saying it didn't suck to interrogate her later? I find that unlikely. Maybe it's a question of degree. No, it's just like Mazov wrote. The freeman of the future will be he who awakens in perfect ignorance of capital. But how could communism and love both have killed him? But I'm still not sure how communism could have killed him. But I'm still not sure how love did him in. And we still don't know what happened to the rest of his armor. Makes sense. It doesn't seem like there's anywhere else she could have gone. Makes sense. Based on my experience, you've got to let her see that you've grown, ideologically speaking. I suppose we'll have to leave it there. But listen, gendarme. We could use someone with your breadth of expertise. With just a little more theoretical background, I think you'll be able to make some real contributions. Besides, it's inconceivable that we turn down a fellow Viral enthusiast. Okay, gendarme. You've earned your place. Welcome to the most ideologically advanced materialist reading group in Martinez. All right, you maniac. Let's see if you can use your brain as well as you use your fists. And with that, welcome to the most ideologically advanced materialist reading group in Martinez. Here's your first assignment. It's an overview of inframaterialist theory. A little basic, as you'll see, but one has to start somewhere. It's sweet how excited you are. Come back when you're done. We'll be here pretty much every night after 10 p.m. You're going to fit right in, I think. Come back when you're done. We'll be here pretty much every night after 10 p.m. Come back when you're done. We'll be here pretty much every night after 10 p.m. Do be sure to take your time with the reading. We'll be eager to hear your thoughts. Is everything all right? Is he trying to say something? Is everything all right? Is there something you're trying to say? Would it help if we change the subject? Everything all right, gendarme? You look a little green about the gills. Some other way? If you're not much of a reader, why are you so dead set on joining this reading group? I suppose we are all here to advance our studies in some form or another. God, it's so pitiful watching a grown man beg. I can hardly stand it. Honor is an outmoded concept, a relic of feudal ideology. All the same, I have to admire your commitment. I do have to admire a certain tenacity, even when it seems to make no sense. Oh, it is. And it only gets more disco from here. I thought I perceived some eschatological air about you, but to be perfectly frank, I just don't see it happening. What? Really? You're saying, but there's no way. Yes, okay, I am listening. All right, gendarme. Comrade Ulexes and I have conferred about it, and we've come up with an alternative way for you to convince us of your commitment to the group. Well, gendarme, what are we waiting for? That was amazing. Uli, perhaps we should tangle with the gendarmerie more often. No, keep it. I feel great, actually. Perhaps we should tangle with the gendarmerie more often. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Perhaps we should tangle with the gendarmerie more often. Sorry? You nearly took my fucking jaw off. What lesson is that, huh? That the RCM are assholes? That they'll take your fucking jaw off? What? You're just gonna stand there after you nearly broke my fucking jaw? Well, if you're not going to play along, I don't think we have anything further to discuss. Good evening to you, gendarme. Yes, let's get right to it. Oh, it's a great story. You should check out Nielsen's journals if you ever have the chance. Ah, yes. That's certainly one of the least developed parts of the theory, but also one of the most intriguing. Oh, yes. Or the fun parts, as we like to call them. But if it's true that this individual possesses so much capital that light literally bends around him, then that must mean, or it suggests that capital, in sufficient quantities, must exhibit its own plasm-like qualities. But my question is, where does the RCM recruit all these hyper-revolutionaries to join this remote viewers division? Fascinating, but I suppose it makes sense that some common strain of inframaterialist thought would persist in the RCM, even to this day, given its origins. But I suppose it makes sense that some common strain of inframaterialist thought would persist in the RCM, even to this day, given its origins. Undoubtedly, the two phenomena are actually deeply intertwined. Many inframaterialists believe that Pale is actually a manifestation of nostalgia and historical inertia. Those same theorists have hypothesized that revolution may in fact create a counterforce that prevents the Pale from expanding. No. We're saying he doesn't need to open them because he absorbs all the relevant content just by staring intently at the cover. It's a widely understood second-level effect. Well, on that note, I think we can call it an evening. What do you mean, is that it? You've done the reading, we talked about it. What more do you expect from a reading group? Well, you could always ask, I guess. But it's getting late, so maybe pick the most important question. Come on. We have things to do in the morning. Are you absolutely sure? A communist can't be afraid to ask questions, just because they don't know what the answer might be. It seems you're right, Uli. I should have listened to you. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have some group business to attend to. Yes? The theorist Puncher and Watman, not inframaterialists, but theorists nonetheless, say that communism is a secular version of Pericanassian theology, that it replaces faith in the divine with faith in humanity's future. What could it hurt? All right, let's give it another go. Easy, Uli. Is it? It's holding. It's holding. Ah, shit. All right, gendarme, your turn. It's, my God. Is it really holding? Don't apologize. As I was saying, if it were easy, it wouldn't require so much plasm to work. Shh. This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And there it goes. My mom's. She works in one of those skyscrapers. But it's not how you think. She's a cleaning lady. Yes, in fact. My mom's. She works in La Delta, in one of those skyscrapers. But it's not how you think. She's a cleaning lady. But how did you? Oh, never mind. I guess I'm easier to read than I thought. Because I always have. Though I try not to do it too often now. It's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? We all have to make sacrifices for the future. Maybe that's what I was trying to get at earlier. I want us all to live in a better world. But yes, she's a part of it. I guess we're all a part of it. Yes, that's a good way to think of it. Broken, but not irreparable. Yes, that's a good way to think of it. A work in progress. A thought can be a very powerful thing. That's the whole idea of inframaterialism. You've got to believe in something. Otherwise, what are you doing? You're right. We should clean this up and get going. Yes, I heard him. Give me a moment. What makes you ask that question above any other? Maybe your problem is that you think it's their job to handle you. Maybe your problem is that you think they're yours to handle. Ah, gendarme. Your problem isn't ideological, it's personal. That's because your brain is floating in ideology, gendarme. It's practically drowning in it. You ask that question because you're still under the influence of ideology. That's natural. You're like a fish that's only now discovering that her whole life has been dictated by the movements of sea currents. That's what ideology is. It's like there are these invisible forces everywhere, pushing and tugging you this way and that, and you don't even know they're there. Everything, man. That is part of the communist project, to destroy the ideological structures that reduce men and women to these hollow shells of identity. Of course it's possible, just extremely difficult. You practically have to be a world historical individual to do it. Do you know the story of Dobrova and Abadanais? No, they were the revolutionary lovers, the dual commissars of revolution in Insulinda, the so-called revolutionary lovers, the dual commissars of revolution in Insulinda, not just lovers. They were the dual commissars of revolution in Insulinda. It's from them we get the notion of dual leadership, the décomptage, Revachol's truly great contribution to revolutionary thought. I believe it even persists in some form in the RCM, even to this day. They died on their own terms, like real revolutionaries. There's a lot to say for that. There's more to it than that. People still make their own choices. It's a matter of being aware of what's influencing them. Sure, we're here most every night. Maybe we'll catch you again. Wait a minute, if you don't mind. We wanted to get your opinion on something. A few little changes we've been thinking about. Nothing too major, I think. We were talking potentially about relaxing some parts of our admissions process. I thought so too, but perhaps we overdid it, just a little. You're right. It probably wouldn't kill us to read more conventional historical materialism. I'm not saying we abandon our beliefs. I just think it would be better if our group had more than 2 regular attendees. Plus, all these empty chairs are a little sad, aren't they? There was another thing. We were also debating putting up some posters around town. Glad to hear it. I was thinking we might be able to get Cindy to design the posters. Ah, it makes sense. There's already a sub-theme of radical street art running through our reading group. Oh, I like that. We're dismantling the structures of capital with our own tools. That's exactly what I was thinking. Exactly. I was thinking we could print them in the old commune art style with huge slogans. I suppose that would open us up to charges of hypocrisy. Not to mention it might make us look pretty desperate for new members. Right. We'll have to table this question until we've considered the potential downstream effects. Plus, I've got the perfect place in mind. Put some more coffee on, Uli. We've got a long night ahead of us. We should probably get Cindy in here too. In any case, we've kept you long enough. Good night to you both. In any case, we've kept you long enough. Good night to you. Oh, and gendarme, one last thing. I've been thinking about what you asked before, about women, you know? About that question you asked earlier. It reminded me of a certain poem that you might appreciate. Not that it's any of my business, but it sounds like this question is really tearing you up inside. So, good luck with that, I guess. In dark times, should the stars also go out? Anyway, good night to you. And next thing you know, there are budget cuts, so now we've got to cut the bean rations in half again. Comrade Ulix is right. The amount of plasm required to strike down an ideological enemy outright is enormous. We're talking second-level effects, at a minimum. More what? It seems like there's something on your mind. Maybe a question you mean to ask? You're not familiar with him? It's pretty advanced stuff. You may not be ready for it yet, gendarme. Only Krasmazov's most trusted lieutenant, the evangelist of the revolution, and the founding father of the People's Republic of Samara. Perhaps some vestigial sexual objectification from your pre-revolutionary consciousness. So you really did read all the way to the end. Yeah, Uli and I were trying to see whether there was enough plasm between the two of us to hold up a few matchboxes. Right. Basically an inframaterialist parlor game. Let's forget about it. Only in this very specific sense. Communism doesn't dangle any promises of eternal bliss or reward. The only promise it offers is that the future can be better than the past, if we're willing to work and fight and die for it. Then you don't believe in the historic role of the proletariat, which also means you reject the basis of historical materialism. Nobody said fulfilling the proletariat's historic role would be easy. It demands great faith with no promise of tangible reward. But that doesn't mean we can simply give up. Even then. Especially then. Yes. Whereas we understand that we'll almost certainly fail, which is what allows us the chance to succeed. I have to say, I've never entirely understood what they mean. But I think maybe the answer is in there. Somewhere. Something else. I'm not sure I get what you're driving at. Of course there will be a future, even if the form it takes might appear unrecognizable. That's the spiral of progress. Yulia Dobrova came from Grad. Jean Nabedanaev was born in Revershol. She was brilliant, charismatic, a revolutionary comet. He was her partner and stabilizer, the planet who kept her in orbit. I guess you could say we believe it because it's impossible. It's our way of saying we refuse to accept that the world has to remain. Like this. It's fine, Uli. That's enough parlor games for one night. We should clean up. Come on, gendarme. Real progress requires great risks. Either way, that's enough parlor games for one night. Thanks for humoring us. Well, it may be that we found the outermost limit of our capabilities under the prevailing regime. Alternatively, it could be that our own ideological fervor is still insufficient. For a second there, I thought we had it. Just goes to show how constrained we are under the limits of the prevailing regime. No, it was exactly what's supposed to happen. We should treat it that way. Yeah, I'm sure you did. That's real Saramaritzian twill. Only old Saramaritzian communists and drug smugglers wear those anymore. Cindy is... how to describe her role? Yes, that's exactly how I would put it. And naturally, we support her radical counter-liberal aesthetics. That doesn't stop her from using a room for studio space, of course. That's a fascinating trajectory for sure. It's good to hear that you can still grow ideologically even at an, advanced age. Interesting. So you're saying that in a certain sense the game plays the players as much as they play the game? Even then. Oh, sure. but you can always join a book club if that's what you're into. I want you to hit me. It was written by a young communard who was killed on the barricades during the coalition landings. The story goes that he wrote it on the last night of his life, keeping watch from the barricades in the middle of the night. I don't have the whole thing committed to memory, but there's a line in it I think about sometimes. Yeah, it's hers. She just sort of moved it all in a few months ago. That's Cindy's stuff. She just sort of moved it all in a few months ago. Oh, sure. It's definitely interesting, I would say. And I don't think she could afford rent at an actual studio. I guess you could call her latest stuff a sort of counter-bourgeoisie calligraphy. She's got a real taste for radical slogans. I'm not sure it would do very much good. She's sort of impervious to authority. Come on. It's not that I don't have anything to say about Cindy's art. It's more that I'm still working out the details. It's a complex question. You've got to take your time with it. The deal? At a fundamental level, I guess you could call it the shattered bones of a dream crushed by capital. I think she'll get there, though. She's still looking for a subject equal to her ambitions. Yes, that's the question you should be asking yourself. Good point, Uli. Thanks, Uli. When the idea is sound, the words just sort of flow. Yeah, that's not bad. Besides, it's just a first draft. It's an old construction site. They've been trying to restore these apartments for years, but as you can see, they haven't made much progress. That could be. It would explain some of the more ornate detailing. But we're speaking in world historical terms here. What this place represents, not what it merely was. You know, if you wanted to borrow my jacket, you could have just asked. But no matter. What's on your mind?